this is a great group. Look how many people are here. I'm so excited. How many of us got or as our President Reinert with the American Ambulance Association, how he likes to say, who all are the winners for 2020 that got picked? So we have, oh my goodness. There's a slide in a minute, but I think there was 70 in your state that got picked. So we have, gosh, looks like 40 of you at least. So good. So thanks again for being here. We'll get started. Ron was very nice to introduce us. This is our faculty that you'll see around the country as we go. And this year alone, we've been to, I think, 50, this is like number 54, 55 places that we've been teaching this topic. So you guys got extra lucky that you got ASBEL today along with me. So that's a good thing. Just as a disclaimer, just so you all know, ASBEL or I, neither one are attorneys. I act like one sometimes at work, but I'm really not. We're not CPAs, and we are not providing legal advice. We're not providing financial advice. We are simply providing education. And so you need to contact your own attorneys, CPAs, financial planners, those kind of people to get information specific to your company. This is educational only today. So, how many here have, well, I don't want anybody to out themselves. I've been in this 34 years. This is
1, 2.
So if
Maybe
I
we'll
use,
just talk loud. There you go. That might work better.
okay. Well, let me just take this one off. Hello.
No worries.
I don't know.
All's well that ends well.
We'll take it off in a minute. If we get feedback, then we'll play with it again. So anyway, I've been in EMS for 34 years, and this is when everybody's supposed to say, oh, really? Okay, I know it's early. So anyway, does anybody remember, and you don't have to raise your hand, back in 1965 when Medicare became a thing? Really? I heard a little yes. Anyway, that's when the Social Security Act got signed into law that created Medicare. Medicare is Part A and Part B. Part B pays for ambulance. Part A pays for hospitalizations and for the providers. Part B pays for the suppliers. Ambulances are suppliers of transportation. That's important to keep that in mind. That's how we are classified with CMS. Who all in here does billing? Okay, a few of you. So some of you guys are going to be familiar, and that's why most of you are not. And that's why we want to just give you a really brief history of how we got to where we are standing here today. So then the Medicare was created in 1965, signed into law by President Johnson. And back then, they had what was called a charge-based payment system. If you charged $100, Medicare would pay $80, and the patient was responsible for $20. The same service to the same patient by a different ambulance service, they may charge $500, and Medicare would pay 80% of that, or $400, and the patient would be responsible for $100. It didn't matter. It was the same service, but the same type of transportation, but the same two different charges. Medicare just paid 80% of what was billed to them. And that rocked on along until we get to negotiated rulemaking back in 1999. And I know some of you might remember that. Do you remember when we went to a fee schedule? Okay, and we did the transition period, and we had the Q codes. And before that, if you had an ALS service, you could bill ALS. If you were mandated to have all ALS, like you had to have all paramedics or all advanced or intermediates back then, or paramedics on your trucks, and it didn't matter what kind of service it was, you could bill an ALS charge. Well, with the fee schedule and the negotiated rulemaking, what happened was now that's where we get our levels of service, the ALS-1, BLS-1, BLS emergency, non-emergency, that's where that came into play. Pickup and destinations, paramedic intercept, different things happened with negotiated rulemaking. Now, why this is important,
Now we're talking.
Hang on, because I think you can turn that off because I think this one's working now. That woke everybody up, didn't it? So, okay, that's going to have to come down a little bit. It's scaring myself. What happened with negotiated rulemaking is they put, now I should stand up here and tap dance or something. I think I'm, is it the other one? Hello? There we go. I love EMS for one reason is, if nothing else, is because we are very adaptable to different things as they happen. So what happened is with negotiated rulemaking, they got a bunch of people in a room and they said, here's the pot of money that we spent last year on EMS. It's X number of dollars. You all sit around the table and you negotiate the rules that will determine what gets paid for what. Now this is important because they set a finite amount of money, what they had paid in the previous year or the previous average of a couple of years. So they had X number of dollars and all these people sit around the table and they say, okay, we're going to pay this much for ALS 1, this is going to be the base rate for ALS 2, this is how we're going to define SCT or specialty care transport, and this is how much we're going to pay for it. Well, so that happened, and in 2005 it was fully implemented. So for the last 14 years, what have we been saying as an industry? You're not paying us enough. We are losing money every time we transport Medicare beneficiaries. Well, that doesn't make sense. Why? It's the same amount of money. So it's just divided different. So why all of a sudden are we not being paid enough? This is why. Back then, and I can attest personally, I worked for a smaller county government system. We had a really, really nice tax subsidy, ad valorem taxes. I don't know if you guys have those here, but property taxes that supplemented our charges. Our charges were artificially low because our property owners subsidized our service. That was not taken into account in negotiated rulemaking. There were a lot of services across the United States. I know a lot of fire services did this because they had tax subsidies from the city. They didn't want to charge their citizens more than what it took to actually provide the service. They weren't in it to make, a huge profit. They were in it to provide a service. And so when you had tax subsidies from the city, your charge for the ambulance might only be $100. Whereas a different service without tax subsidies, it may legitimately be, back then, $500 or $600. And so the pot of money was small where it shouldn't have been because they didn't take into account all of the subsidies. That's why, if anybody's wondering why all of a sudden you're losing money transporting Medicare beneficiaries, that's why. So for the last 14 years, we've been saying, you're not paying us enough. So this is what happened. The Balanced Budget Act of 2018 came along, and they extended the add-ons, the 2%, 3%, and 22.6% for urban, rural, and super rural for 5 years. That was a huge win for us because we had been doing it and getting it like a year at a time, a couple of years at a time. And so every year we're going back to the Congress and we're saying, hey, we've got to have these extensions. We've got to have these extenders and these add-ons to help make up for the losses of transporting Medicare beneficiaries. Well, so they extended it for 5 years. And we're going to talk about that a little bit more, how that could be an issue here in a little bit. But this is where Medicare, CMS, Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services, said, okay, you've been saying for 14 years we're not paying you enough. Show us. How do we show them? We provide cost data. Now, hospitals have been doing this for a long, long time. Anybody here with a hospital background familiar with cost reports? Anybody? No, but nobody's moaning and groaning, so I'm going to say no. It's a humongous undertaking that hospitals have to do every year. They line item all of their costs, all of their revenues, all of their allocations. All of it gets line itemed in a humongous document that gets submitted every year. ESRDs, nursing facilities, a lot of different medical providers and suppliers have to submit cost reports every year. So CMS came back and they said, okay, show us the money, show us the data, show us why we're not paying you enough. And the AAA worked really, really hard, and I know that I'm here on behalf of the AAA, but I've got to tell you that they are an unsung hero, and even I didn't realize it until we got in the middle of this. We lobbied and approached the Congress over and over and over to say we cannot do a cost report. Yes, we want to provide you the data. Yes, we want to prove what we're saying because we know we're right. But we can't do a cost report. And so what they did was they came up with a cost data survey. It is much less onerous, it is much less time consuming, but it will still give them good data to show where the money is going as far as why when we're saying you're not paying us adequately for transporting Medicare beneficiaries, this should give them the information. So what happened was the proposed rule was published in July of this year. There was a 60-day comment period. The comments were submitted in end of September, and then the final rule was published November 1st. The final rule is what we're talking about now because that has the cost data instrument, is what they're calling it. That has it, and that's what we're going to go through today, give you the highlights and tell you kind of what to look for, what not to look for, and why some of the stuff that we're going to talk about is really important. Now, one of the things, and we talked about this just briefly, why is this important? It's because we've been telling them forever that, you're not paying us enough. I think some of the studies, the GAO, Government Accounting Office, has done a couple of different studies. MedPAC, which is a bipartisan payment advisory committee on Medicare to the Congress, they've done studies. Others have shown that anywhere from -1 to -16% is what loss when we transport Medicare beneficiaries. So that's why the add-ons are so important, and that's why it's important to give them the data. Now, as we worked with them, about 95% of what we asked for got included in the final rule, and that's a very, very good thing. Number one, it's a single survey tool. It's not a different tool for fire and a different tool for private and a different tool for government. We didn't want that because then you're going to be stuck with where we are now, and you can't compare apples to apples. So that was a good thing. Another good thing was it included both costs and revenues. It includes mechanisms to allocate your different costs across different service lines. One of the big wins is you can be either fiscal or calendar year. I know, do we have a lot of government services here that report on a calendar or a fiscal year, Yeah, typically like a July 1 or an October 1. Well, you get to pick. You get to pick which one you're going to report on, and I'll tell you how we do that here in just a minute. They clarified some of the definitions that were questionable in the proposed rule. Did anybody look at the proposed sampling instrument when it came out? Anybody get a chance to download that or look at it? Has anybody looked at the final one so far? A few of you?
Well, you are going to today.
Yeah, we're going to look at it today. And did they include it in their workbook? Do you guys have that?
Yes.
Okay. So, and then one of the other big things is, this is a huge win. And I'll show you a slide here in just a second. But they picked the winners for 2020 based on the last full year that they had Medicare data on, which was 2017. Initially, we were going to have to go back to that data to report, to send them the information based on 2017 data. And me personally stood up on a table and screamed and yelled and said, no, I can't. I have to go through every single call to find that, and that's going to take thousands of hours. And so what they said is, okay, we're going to go going forward. So if you are picked, you're going to start collecting your data January 1 of 2020. If you're on a fiscal year, then you'll submit starting whatever it is your fiscal year, July 1 of 2020. This is a win because now that we have the instrument in front of us, we know what data they're going to want, what they're going to ask. You can set up your systems. You can set up your procedures. If you don't have like electronic billing systems or you don't have a lot of complicated software, that's okay. If you're a small service, sometimes I think it's going to be easier for the smaller services because where I came from initially as a small service, you had one person that was doing the materials management, who worked with HR, who knew about the salaries, and also maintained the vehicles. So instead of having 10 people around a table trying to get their heads together on what data to report, you had like 3 people. So it really did make it a lot easier. I've worked with some services over this last year that legitimately, we can keep a legal yellow pad. And as they go on their 1 or 2 calls a week, just log it in the appropriate column, and by the time you're ready to submit, it's all right there. So it's not necessarily going to be really, really hard for smaller services like we were afraid of initially. It may be easier for some of the smaller services. Here are just some ideas. That's what it looks like in the middle that you guys have on your slide. That's the title of it, the final rule, and then there's some other documents. Now, if you'll go to ambulancereports.org, and that's in your slides as well, but I'll tell you again, ambulancereports.org. Sign up for the listserv. It is free. We do not spam you. We don't inundate you with email after email. We don't do anything. We don't give your email to anybody, but you will get notified when something happens. You'll get an email that says, hey, the final rule got published, et cetera, et cetera. And there's links to all of these. Medicare put out a frequently asked questions that clarified some of the information in the instrument. There is a open door forum on December 5th, tomorrow, and there's a link to that. So I would highly encourage you guys to dial in and listen. It's a phone call. You don't have to ask questions if you don't want to, but there's an opportunity to ask questions at the end. And the last one CMS did on the 7th, I believe 6th, was really good. I was really surprised. They outlined it pretty well. They had some good information, and I was very encouraged with that. So also on ambulancereports.org is a link to this program called AMBER. Now, if you have us back after the first of the year, we're redoing how we're going to teach this because we will have more information. CMS is going to put out some clarifying documentation. They're going to put out some more answers to questions, and so we are refining it, but we're going to walk through AMBER. AMBER is a software program that you can use. It's like TurboTax. You can enter yes, no questions. Do you respond to 911 calls? Yes or no. How many did you respond to last year? Type in the number. And it will format it in a way to upload it to CMS's reporting mechanism. They say it's going to be web-based, but they haven't released it yet. But we're working with them, and we're working with your software vendors like ESO and Tritech, SweetSoft. Well, that dates me a little bit right there, doesn't it? Zoll, your billing systems, to integrate, to pull some of that information as well so you don't do double work. But anyway, AMBER is a software program that you can purchase. We also have some scholarships available for some free memberships that comes with the free AMBER. So that information will be coming out as well. You do not have to be a member of the American Ambulance Association. We would like for you to be, but you do not have to be. So please go there, sign up, get the information, look at the AMBER, and we'll talk a little bit more about that as we go along. So I know a whole lot of people don't do billing in here. Does anybody have a clue what I'm talking about when I say your 855B or PAYCOs? Do not be embarrassed if you do not know. If you are not into billing and you don't deal with it every day, you may not know. Excuse me. Your 855B is your Medicare enrollment form. That's how Medicare knows who to pay and how to pay you. That is a very, very, very important document. Do you remember about 5 years now? They started with the revalidations, and you had to get all that done and revalidate, or you were not going to get paid, and they were not kidding. PAYCOS is the electronic version of that. Why this is important is because if you're not familiar with it, or if you have a billing company that does all of this for you, get with your billing company, make sure that your information is correct. Of the people who are winners for 2020, has everybody received an email notifying you, or did you just look on the list? Which on ambulancereports.org, there's also a link to the list of all the services that have been selected. Letters? Okay. They are emailing, and they are also sending out letters. What we are...
Let me ask one question, because I see a lot of fire departments in here. How many are on the list in here? Okay, so a majority of you are on the list. How many received a letter? Did the letter come directly to you? No? Where did it come from?
It came to our township.
So it came to your township. How many use a billing agency to do their billing? Okay. So the majority of this stuff we're talking about was probably done by your billing agency. And so the address information and stuff that Rebecca's going to go over here is relative to what we're talking about now. How many are on the list but haven't received anything yet? There's a few of you that are on the list, so you saw yourself on the list posted, but you haven't received anything. Okay, This is probably, if you haven't received anything, or some of your colleagues that may be on the list and not in this room today have indicated they haven't received anything, very, very important that if you're on the list, you should have gotten notification by now. Because you have 30 days to select whether you're going to be calendar year reporting or fiscal year reporting. And so this information that we're going to go over here today, you need to make sure that it's accurate. So we're going to spend a little time on this, tell you exactly the websites to go to, because your billing agency probably has handled that for you. But remember, even though your billing agency did it, it actually resides with you. You're responsible for that information. So I think that gives us a good tenor. Most people have gotten letters. You should have received an email as well. So your email information may be incorrect. It may be going to your billing agency or something like that, or whoever the authorized individual is. So you'll want to make sure all that information is still accurate, because we're noticing here a lot of inaccurate information on this program.
So that's the important thing is, number one, make sure that your authorized representative is somebody who actually works for you, because we're finding that out if you revalidated 5 years ago and that person no longer works for you. If that letter comes to that person, number one, make sure whoever gets the mail knows not to throw the letter away or return to sender, because they no longer work here. If something comes from, who's your carrier, or who's your MAC? WPS. If a letter comes from WPS, somebody needs to open it. Don't return it. Number two, get on there and make sure that the right person is listed. Make sure that your legal name is listed, so that when you fill out your cost survey, it matches what's on your 855B or PAYCOs. You know, the service I work for now has 5 different names under 5 different corporations over 4 different states. So I don't want to put, Pafford EMS when it really is Pafford Emergency Medical Services, Inc., because that's a different corporation in a different state. So you need to make sure those match. Number two, make sure you're categorized correctly. On the 855B, you can be proprietary or nonprofit. You can also be a corporation, sole proprietor, LLC, partnership, or other. Or you can be Indian Health. Here's the weird part about this. You pick one of these: corporation, sole proprietor, LLC, partnership, or other. Most of us in here are going to be an other. If you leave this blank, proprietary, nonprofit, they automatically will default you to proprietary. So we end up with a lot of miscategorized services because you're a fire department for profit, because nobody checked a box and so it got defaulted to profit. That's going to skew everything, because that's how they're going to look at you. So you can get on there and correct that. And it's not a big deal to correct it. Or your billing, whoever does your 855B, double check that your person is correct that works there, your legal name is correct, and that you are categorized correctly. Now, you do this through NPPES, National Plan Provider Enumeration System. It's really easy. It's not difficult. If you have questions, I'm sure there's people here, especially Katie can help you. I can help you. You can reach out to us. It's not a big deal to do it. Here's just kind of a heat map. Yes, ma'am.
We worked on the Michigan list because they used our lockbox, which is in Chicago, Illinois, but the letter came to us. So do you think that that's wrong? I mean,
Okay, the question is, you have a lockbox in Chicago, but the letter actually came to your address here.
right, so we were on the Illinois list.
You were on the Illinois list.
We got the letter at our address, so is there a miscommunication in our information somewhere?
No, so with her question saying you've got a lockbox in another state, so you're on another state. Originally, we thought that when they did the stratification of the organizations that they chose in that first sample, that it was state specific. It was not state specific. So it really would not matter if you have a lockbox in a neighboring state. Not too worried about that. When they actually take the information, they're going to take it from where your base location is. So you're going to be okay on that standpoint.
Do you think that there's a...
Yep, I would change it. I would change your lockbox so that you get, if you want your information to come directly to you, any of your mail, that you want them, that WPS to mail to you, just make sure your NPPES is updated correctly.
Okay.
Because you might have your checks going for your reimbursement to your lockbox, but you want all your correspondence going somewhere else. You just need to fix that. Yeah.
In PAYCOs.
In PAYCOs.
Yeah. So they stratified a random sample, and there's about 11,000 or so ambulance services in the United States. So they picked 2,664 ambulance services, and they based them on provider versus supplier, ownership, what kind of ownership they had, whether they were, the sole proprietor, corporation, or all that. Then they went by your service population density, your volume of transports, the type of services. Are you 911? Are you non-emergency only? So they stratified 25% throughout those different categories. How you staffed, if you use volunteers. So it wasn't like Asbel was saying, it was not state specific like we thought it was going to be. So that's why you have several in some states and almost none in others. So this in Michigan, when we did the count on the list, there's 70, and that's kind of what the list looks like. It's got you can search by NPI. You can on the link that we have on ambulancereports.org. It's also on the CMS ambulance homepage. You can search and just double check and make sure. If you haven't gotten a letter, you haven't got an email. Me personally, I would go look and just make sure that I'm not on that list. So you'll get an email. It looks kind of like this. It says, as you may know, CMS is required to collect cost, revenue, utilization, and other information. And your NPI has been randomly selected to report information. And it is required. Now, they say this. I noticed this is like in the second paragraph. I thought that was nice. They put that right up front. Failure to sufficiently submit information under the data collection results in a 10% reduction of payments under Medicare Part B. So if you don't submit your information the next year, you're going to get a 10% penalty. So this is another humongous win for the ambulance industry, because when the bill was originally written and got stuck in the different committees, and if anybody deals with how a bill becomes law, it's a long process, and it has to go through multiple steps. Well, it was stuck in one Senate Finance Committee, and they had the penalty as a recoupment of 100% of your Medicare dollars from the previous year. And for some reason, they were stuck on that. We lobbied hard and long to get that changed. So this is a huge win for us, that's what it is. It's still going to be a huge loss to your community and your service if you don't get the information reported. And especially because they have simplified it to the point that it's not a cost report, it's a survey, cost data survey. And you have lots and lots of help. We are here to help you. That's another kind of one of the messages that I hope you get today is please don't panic. We have assistance out there, we have help out there, and we're going to get you through this. It is so critical that everybody submit accurate data, because even though the data will be submitted and it will be published in the aggregate, it's not going to be individually identifiable information. Now, if you look at the hospital data, that's the same way. In Oklahoma, where I'm from, I don't know if you noticed I have a little bit of an accent. I'm not from Michigan. I'm from Oklahoma. There's one large ambulance service that does over 150,000 calls a year. So if they do the aggregate, but they divide it into categories, smaller services, larger service, and they say a large urban ambulance provider with greater than 100,000 calls, well, everybody knows who it is. There's only one it could be. So can somebody identify you from the data? If you're a smaller service and there's a lot of other smaller services around you, probably not. But they're not going to identify you by name and your data. It's going to be aggregated. So this is the reporting period. This is what the letter looks like, and this is what you've got 30 days on. When they mail you the email or the letter, you've got 30 days to respond to say, we report on a calendar year, we will start collecting January 1. We report on a fiscal year, we will start collecting July 1, October 1, September 1, whichever one your fiscal year is, and you get to choose. You send that back in. So if you are a fiscal year July 1 and you send this back in and say we're going to submit on July 1, you don't even start collecting your data until this coming July 1. And you'll have all the way through June 30th to collect the data, and then June 30th of 2021, and then you will have 5 months to report the data. You'll have until November of 2021 to actually report your data. If you collect on a calendar year, you'll start January 1, 2020, go all the way through December, and then you'll have until May of 2021 to report the data. So you have lots of time to get your system set up, to figure out who the players are, who's going to be your number one person responsible for this, and a number two person responsible for this in case number one runs away, and how to get these data so that you don't have to spend an inordinate amount of time trying to figure this out. So here's your NPPS. You can create a new account. You can log in. This is really, it's not difficult, and we have people to help you if you're not familiar with it. If you have a billing company, just reach out to them and say, hey, double check our data. Make sure that we're all correct.